Today from the global lane, sending the wrong message to Hamas. 3 NATO countries announced they may recognize a Palestinian state.
Recognitions of a Palestinian state, which is a reward for terrorism. And they say, look, we're winning. Their calculations have always been based on the idea that the West will turn on Israel and that cut it off, isolate it, and ultimately hand it to them on a silver platter.
Moving at a frenzied pace of accomplishment, the first 6 months of Trump's second term.
He wants to keep burning the midnight oil. He's got 4 years. Some people have said that, the first 6 months has felt like 4 years.
The NEA rewrites history, replacing Jews in the Holocaust.
Others saying that Hitler and his accomplices exterminated minority groups.
And a football legend shares how he was healed from cancer. And it's all right here on the global lane. Britain has joined France in demanding that Israel end its war in Gaza. If not, the 2 European powers say they will recognize a Palestinian state in September. At the same time, the European Union and Arab League have condemned Hamas for the October 7, 2023 terrorist massacre in Israel. And they say the group needs to release all hostages and end its rule in Gaza. Well, here are some insights as Jewish News Syndicate editor-in-chief Jonathan Tobin. Jonathan, what's driving this decision by France and now Great Britain to support a Palestinian state if Israel doesn't stop fighting in Gaza?
I think it's in part a reaction to domestic politics in those countries where, the hard left and Islamists have formed this bizarre red-green alliance, and they're a real factor in those countries' political equations. And they're reacting also in part to this tsunami of propaganda about starvation in Gaza, which is created by Hamas. Not to say that there isn't suffering in Gaza, which of course there is, but it's of Hamas's creation. They have, there's no shortage of food, but the food isn't being distributed because Hamas hoards it, steals it, sells it back to people at exorbitant prices. That's what's driving the problem.
And there's been a Palestinian state there for 20 years. It's called Gaza, and this is the result of it.
The Hamas state in Gaza was an independent Palestinian state in all but name from 2005 to 2023. If it does, and we saw what happened. It was a terror state. It was only interested in conquering Israel, killing people. They had no interest in developing things for their own people.
So why do you think Hamas is continuing this fight, Jonathan, with both the EU and the Arab League now calling on them to surrender? Hamas must know that they're never going to be victorious and allowed to return to governing Gaza.
Well, they think they can win. They think they're going to win. That's why they're doing what they're doing. I mean, you can say it sounds illogical. They could never beat Israel, and that's true. But they have always calculated, even, on October 7th, when they achieved complete surprise, their calculations have always been based on the idea that the West will turn on Israel and that cut it off, isolate it, and ultimately hand it to them on a silver platter. That's what they're doing. They look at what's gone on in the streets of American and European cities with mobs chanting for Israel's destruction. They see these diplomatic efforts, with recognitions of a Palestinian state which is a reward for terrorism. And they say, look, we're winning. Yes, we couldn't beat the Israelis militarily, but we're beating them politically. And everyone who demands a ceasefire is just encouraging Hamas to hold on and to emerge, and because they believe a ceasefire will let them emerge triumphant from this war, that it will allow them to regain control of Gaza. They think that this is all in the cards for them. It doesn't have to be, and indeed, if Israel sticks to its guns, it won't be. But their ambitions are not unreasonable given the support they've been getting from the West. And that's why it's so dangerous.
Well, for now, it appears the IDF will press on until the hostages are released and Hamas is destroyed. So what do you see happening in the coming days as the second anniversary of the October 7th terrorist massacre approaches?
Well, the war is this is a very difficult situation. Prime Minister Netanyahu don't envy his dilemma. The war is difficult. The foreign pressure is enormous. The pressure from inside Israel for people who want the hostages released. And, the war is exhausting. It's been a long, hard slog. So I think the war just continues, which is dreadful for the Palestinians in Gaza. It's dreadful for Israelis. But the choice is whether you're going to have that or let Hamas win. And Netanyahu knows he cannot let Hamas win, lest Israel be faced with future October 7th and more horror for both sides.
And finally, here domestically, we saw Columbia University agree to a $200 million settlement concerning the civil rights of Jews during pro-Hamas demonstrations on campus. Also, UCLA has settled a $6 million lawsuit with Jewish students. And now it looks like Harvard is reportedly preparing to agree to a settlement, maybe as much as $500 million because of its failure to protect its students from anti-Semitism. So 2 questions here. Do you think these settlements would have happened without President Trump's advocacy? And what's to prevent these universities from ignoring violations of Jewish student civil rights in the future?
Well, first, this wouldn't have happened without President Trump being reelected last November. Biden, another 4 years of the Democrats, of Kamala Harris, would have been the opposite. They were supporting these universities. These deals are not as ideal as his initial demands, but they're still tremendous progress. I mean, this is really the beginning of rolling back the reign of DEI and the woke domination and indoctrination in our education system. It's good for the Jews, for sure, because that's the Jews are the canaries in the coal mine here. This is good for all Americans. Now, how will it be in the future? Well, it's all a matter of enforcement. These deals are great. They're victories no matter what. This is something for Trump to be proud of. But it will be a matter of whether the United States government continues to monitor it, continues to enforce it.
Okay, Jonathan Tobin, JNS Editor-in-Chief. Thank you, Jonathan. We appreciate you sharing your time and insights.
Thank you.
Historic trade deals, ceasefires, and peace agreements, securing the border, ICE raids and deportations, along with a significant tax and budget bill. Love him or hate him, you must admit that Donald Trump's accomplishments in the first 6 months of his second term have been historic. What can we expect in the second half of his first year back in office? Are the Epstein and Russia Obamagate revelations just temporary distractions, or will they provide this president with an opportunity to eliminate moral and political corruption and bring about genuine reform? Well, joining us to share some thoughts is publicist, humorist, conservative columnist, and author A.J. Rice, author of the books The Woking Dead and The White Privilege Album. A.J., these last 6 months have been a wild ride, so do you expect Donald Trump to slow down the frenzied pace of reform, or is he more inclined to say, you ain't seen nothing yet?
That's right. Brother Gary, great to be here. No, he's not going to. This man has another gear, right? He has another gear that, past presidents, at least in my lifetime, did not have. I mean, he doesn't want the Senate and the House to go into recess in August, when they go on their junkets and their vacations, courtesy of all of us, right? He wants to keep burning the midnight oil. He's got 4 years. Some people have said that, the first 6 months has felt like 4 years. And here's the thing also, and Susie Wiles knows this, and a lot of his team knows this, is that he was put in there to be a disruptor. All this talk about the Great Reset, well, you got one. Except unlike the first term, he didn't come alone. He came with an entire team of disruptors. Hegseth, Rubio, RFK Jr., Tulsi, Scott Bessent. Half of those characters, by the way, are clients here at Publius PR. I know them all well. Hegseth and I go back 20 years. So he cannot sort of read the room and think that he needs to run everything through what I call the bathroom wall. Okay, the bathroom wall warriors. What are they? They're the little five-star generals that are on Twitter and Facebook, and they're upset about Iran, or they're upset about Israel, or Bongino and Cash and Pam aren't moving fast enough for them. He cannot get distracted in that, and he has to take a 100-year view, which is what I think he's doing. He's able to do micro and macro at the same time. You see that with the trade deals. And you see that with him, managing domestic things when needed. That's the art of the deal. This is basically the art of democracy. And buckle up, ladies and gentlemen.
Well, how much support do you think he's lost from MAGA Republicans who say they're disappointed with his handling the Epstein files? And how should he handle that at this point?
He has lost nothing. He has lost nothing. He's lost a few people with large format audiences that are putting him through a purity test. I find this interesting. As you know, and as this station knows, there was only ever one perfect person. And he lived and died at age 33. It wasn't Reagan, it wasn't Lincoln, it wasn't George Washington, it's certainly not Donald Trump. So, when you're applying the purity test to a man you claim to have supported in 3 terms in a row, never been done before, except by FDR, never been done by a Republican. Nixon, three times he was the nominee, not consecutively. So you either think, take the Iran situation, you either think that he's going to be like Reagan, who bombed Gaddafi, who invaded Grenada, and he's going to use peace through strength, or you think, having told your audiences for 10 years about how wonderful Donald Trump was, you think that at any moment he's going to unzip his skin suit and Dick Cheney's going to pop out. So which is it? You're either lying to your audience or you run out of things to complain about.
Well, Deputy Director Dan Bongino recently posted on X what he's learned so far at the FBI has, quote, shocked him down to his core. He'll never be the same. That's what he said. What do you think he's talking about here? Is he talking about widespread government and corporate corruption, money laundering, child trafficking? What?
Yes. So Dan, full disclosure, is a client of ours as well. I've known him a long time, since long back, before anyone knew his name. He is a very straight shooter. And if he's disturbed by something, it must be really big. And I would say to your audience, it's probably weaponization. It's probably some level of weaponization, which could include all of the crimes and misdemeanors that you just ticked off there. And look, he's a no nonsense guy. So he was making plenty of money, had this great house in Florida. He didn't need any of this. Yeah. So I know there's some people chirping at him too. And, let them do their job. Really. Now, what you don't want to do is, overpromise and underdeliver. You start to look like Geraldo in Al Capone's tomb, right? Right. So you definitely don't want to do that. So you've got to, maintain expectations. And, Bondi maybe got out there on a branch that wasn't sturdy enough. But look, you got to rein it in. I think Cash and Dan will deliver. And like you said when we started here, it's only been 6 months. This is a multi-decade level of corruption here. I hate to say it, it could go back to the Reagan years. Could go back to even before that. Because, until Trump came along and disrupted the passing of the baton from one, family to another, right? And people that were getting the stamp of approval from the establishment and from the deep state, until he came along, everyone was perfectly happy with the system that was in place. And obviously now he's dumped the suitcase out in front of everyone.
Well, we'll see where all this leads. A.J. Rice, publicist and author of The Woking Dead and the White Privilege album. Thank you, A.J. We appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us.
Gary, love you, brother. Keep fighting. Thank you.
America's largest teachers union, which advocated for closing classrooms and masking students during the COVID pandemic, is now rewriting history. The National Education Association has altered its 2025 Teacher's Guide, erasing Jews from the Holocaust. Here to set us straight on this development is Gary Finkel. He's a Young Voices contributor, opinion writer, and PhD student at Texas A&M University. Gary, tell us more about the NEA erasing Jews from the Holocaust. So how can they consider themselves serious educators without teaching American children that the Nazis killed 6 million Jews? Who are they saying Hitler and his accomplices exterminated?
They're saying that Hitler and his accomplices exterminated minority groups without emphasizing the centrality of the Jews to the Holocaust. And what this really illustrates is that the National Education Association really isn't interested in education. It's a left-wing political arm that cares more about Palestine than phonics. It cares more about distinguishing anti-Zionism from anti-Semitism than it does that making sure that our children are getting a quality education. And perhaps most importantly, it shows that politics are always going to be the flavor of the day and the interests of the more than 3 million American public school teachers who really aren't that concerned about any of this. They're more concerned about making sure that they teach math and their students aren't throwing chairs at them, are totally unheard of. So not only are they being anti-Semitic over at the NEA, they're being utterly ineffective at what they're even supposed to do, which is advocate for American teachers.
Well, also, the NEA Guide revises history by stating that the State of Israel was founded through forced violent displacement and dispossession. Is there any mention of the San Remo Conference, the Balfour Declaration, Arab countries waging war against Israel in 1948?
There's no mention of it at all, because that would counteract the anti-Semitic narrative that they're trying to propagate. The issue for the teachers' unions when they look at actual history is that they find that it's messy. And if they really want to put the blame on somebody for Israel's existence, it would really have to be the British or the French, rather than the hundreds of thousands, millions of Jews that came to Israel in order to flee persecution from their neighbors, in order to flee genocide in the case of the Holocaust and in some of the attacks against Mizrahi Jews in the Middle East later in the century. But all of this messy history is unfitting for their unadulterated left-wing ideas, so they just pretend they don't exist.
Well, there are 3 million teachers in the NEA, so who's behind this revisionist history and why?
Well, the problem when it comes to teachers' unions is that they're so large, and in many states, even though membership isn't officially required, you run into problems if you're not a member. So the rank and file isn't really interested in this. All this is coming from a small segment of really, really, really passionate progressive radicals that take over these institutions in order to orient them towards their desired political direction. So ultimately, you're hearing from a very, very small fraction of American teachers, the vast majority of whom are normal. But because the radicals have taken control of the NEA, they get control of the money, they get control of the political influence, they get control of curriculum development in some cases, and that's why we're experiencing all these problems.
Sounds a little bit like the Democratic Party right now. And at a time when Columbia University settled with the Trump administration and its Jewish students for violating civil rights during recent pro-Hamas protests, the NEA membership voted to suspend ties with the Anti-Defamation League, and they said its union members felt they must support Palestine. Now, the NEA board and executive committee reversed that decision, and you recently wrote a published article about it. Is the NEA membership becoming anti-Semitic? Tell us more.
I think NEA leadership is certainly anti-Semitic, and they're taking the membership, a lot of whom don't really know what's going on in the union, along for the ride. But the reason that this is so destructive, even though it's a small fraction of American teachers, is because the Anti-Defamation League, for all of their political problems, was responsible for a lot of the really high-quality Holocaust education that was making its way into American schools. And if the NEA is now positioning itself as being hostile to this form of really high-quality Holocaust education, then they're in effect positioning themselves as being hostile towards Jews. And if the nation's largest teachers union at any rate, is going to position itself as being so antagonistic towards this country's Jewish community, that's going to be a real big problem, and one that we're going to need to address.
Gary, and quickly, so what should be done about it? Anything? I mean, this is the largest teachers union in the USA.
Well, the way to do this is to just neuter the union's power. My home state of Texas has teachers unions, but they're prevented by state law from engaging in collective bargaining. And I think other states are just going to have to take the initiative and be willing to go to war with the union in order to make sure that their students are protected from these far left political interests.
Okay, and maybe moving to charter schools, homeschooling, things like that. Garrison Finkel,
Absolutely.
Young Voices contributor, our best to you as you prepare your PhD thesis. Thanks for setting us straight today.
Thanks for having me.
In the USA, sharing your faith is not limited to private spaces or times of crisis. And it certainly does not end in the workplace. This week, at the direction of President Trump, the Office of Personnel Management sent out a memo to federal employees assuring them that their constitutional right to religious freedom would be honored throughout the government. Employees are guaranteed the right to keep a Bible and display a cross or Star of David at work. They can pray with their coworkers and share their faith openly. No longer are they forced to keep their beliefs hidden or confined to their homes or places of worship. This is certainly good news for people of all faiths. Additionally, there was more encouraging news on the faith front this week. NFL legend and college football coach Deion Sanders spoke openly about how God intervened to heal him of aggressive bladder cancer. Deion's son, Bucky, documented his father's battle on YouTube. He expressed that it was an opportunity for God's glory to be demonstrated through the trials and tribulations the family faced since last April, as Sanders underwent tests for another medical issue. Moments before Deion entered the operating room, he asked Bucky to pray.
We know you're in control of everything. You should ask and you receive, so we're asking for a great successful surgery, and let them not find anything. And it is what it is. Let your will be done. Thank you for everything. In Jesus' name, amen.
After the surgery, Deion's doctor announced that he is now cancer-free and can return to coaching this fall. A grateful Deion urged people to seek a doctor's care.
Get checked out, because it could have been a whole another gathering. God is so good, you have no idea.
Sanders expressed his gratitude to everyone who prayed for him and rhetorically asked, without prayer, where would we be? He understands that during both good times and challenging moments, God is always with us and listens to our prayers. All we need to do is speak, share our hearts, and then release our concerns to Him. As Deion Jr. prayed, Lord, may your will be done. We are thankful that for now, God's will is for Coach Sanders to live another day and continue in the game. That's it today from the Global Lane. Until next time, be blessed.